Fellas, the 4th anniversary has finally arrived to Blue Archive Global as we're heading to the Millennium Expo as part of the new event Codebox Shadow Looming Over Millennium. And this week, we are at long last getting both the highly anticipated 4th FES units, Rio and Uniform Neru, with Swimsuit Hanako being the rerun Anniversary unit. In this video, I will be reviewing Uniform Neru, whereas Rio has already been reviewed in a separate video. Link to it in the pinned comment. Anyways, without further ado, here is a short review of Uniform Neru. Fellas, we certainly aren't short of Cunnies in the 4th anniversary, cause our favorite feisty yet adorable unstoppable force of Millennium is here. It's CNC's codename Double O and Seiya's new bestie, it's Uniform Neru. I've always liked Neru, but I've never really been into her previous designs, mainly cause I ain't a fan of her portrait's art style, plus her maid/bunny outfits aside from the Sukajan jacket weren't exactly my cup of tea. But holy, I am digging her uniform's design. Firstly, I really prefer her uniform version's portrait cleaner, brighter art style, courtesy of Namuga Sensei taking over MX2J, and Neru is absolutely cooking in that uniform. I love the combination of the fully unbuttoned white dress shirt with the sakura flower t-shirt that she's wearing underneath, giving her uniform a blend of modern plus traditional Japanese vibes. Plus that black jacket tied around her waist makes her look even more fashionable. There's also her usual short orange hairstyle with that giant ahoge and single knot. The new art style has certainly allowed me to appreciate it even more. And those red crimson eyes that scares her enemies but is soft when she's with Sensei. Overall, I'm digging her new cool casual look, but the main reason why I like Neru so much is her fiery personality, as well as her combat prowess as CNC's strongest maid, being especially unparalleled in close quarters combat, which was on full display when she beat the shit out of Toki in the elevator, proving she's Millennium's explosive unstoppable force. And that seems to be the case even in her uniform version as seen in her EX animation. So what kind of student is she? Well, Uniform Neru is a limited fast piercing striker damage dealer with elastic armor, whose terrain modes are as follows: S combat power in urban terrains, A combat power in field, and D combat power indoors. The equipment she uses are head, bag and watch, with the head and watch improving her efficiency as a DPS unit. Let's talk about her skills in full detail. Uniform Neru is our second ever fast yellow damage dealer, having a fully offensive kit that focuses on dishing out tons of pure damage, while having a number of potent self buffs to further increase her damage output. Firstly, she initially has a 1 cost EX where she targets an enemy and both of them enter the dueling state for 70 seconds, increasing the damage she deals to the dueled enemy by a fixed 0.2 times or 20%, while immediately redrawing her EX skill card, changing it to a second enhanced EX that lasts throughout the dueling state. This new 4-cost EX skill allows her to deal massive amounts of single target damage to one enemy with its huge 1469% multiplier at max level skill. She also grants herself one ambition stack, being able to hold up to a max of 5. And when she reverts back to her first EX after the dueling state is over, all ambition stacks are reset. As you can see, her second EX is her primary source of damage, cause with it, she can deal a ton of yellow single target damage, especially due to its pretty high multiplier and the 0.2 times damage increase buff when attacking the dual target, with the latter incentivizing you to focus Neru's EX on that particular enemy as they'll receive more damage. Other than that, her EX is also a huge multi-hit ability as she unleashes 46 hits in one use, which can be really good cause it means she can dish out more consistent crits since her EX is broken up into many hits that each deal a small amount of her overall damage. Unlike DPS units with 1/a few hit EXs who might have more crit and stability issues since all the damage comes from that 1/few hits. so this means she can be less crit and stability moldy to use, plus it will also be useful in certain situations which require multi-hit units. Aside from that, her first EX's 1 cost is very low, which is really good, plus it instantly redraws her EX, so you can basically consider it as 0 cost. And her damage dealing EX's 4 cost is actually pretty nice. It's not too expensive, but you can still and sometimes would use cost cutting units to halve it down to 2. One last thing to note, if the enemy in the dueling state is defeated, this status effect is not transferred to another enemy. You will need to reapply it by using her 1 cost EX, and the 0.2 times damage dealt buff will disappear cause it's towards the dual target, which is why she is much better against bosses instead of easily defeated enemies like minions. Next, I'd like to talk about her sub skill first, as it is directly related to her EX. At level 10 skill, it passively provides her with a 24.2% damage dealt buff, and when using her second EX skill, the damage it deals is increased by 0.35 times or 35% for every ambition stack. The latter buff is extremely useful cause it essentially allows Neru's EX to grow stronger in power the more times you use it, since each ambition stack additively increases its damage dealt by 35%, with this buff capping at 5 times cause she can only hold a max of 5 stacks, meaning her 5th and any subsequent EX activations will be the most powerful, as her EX's damage will be increased by a whopping 175%. However, this buff only applies throughout her dueling state period, as her ambition stacks reset once it's over, so you'd want to use her EX as many times as you can within the dueling state's 70-second duration, ideally at least 5 times to fully maximize the damage. Thus, one of her best partners is Rio, the other 4th FES unit, cause her ability to duplicate Neru's 4 cost EX while reducing the dupe's cost down to 3 means more EX activations, subsequently helping to build up the ambition stacks faster and allowing her to dish out more damage. Plus, you can also use cost-cutting units like Seiya to halve her cost twice for faster EX use. So using Neru with these units can let you hit that 5 EX activations within the dueling state quicker and more smoothly for the maximized damage output. Aside from that, her sub's passive 24.2% damage increase can also help greatly further increase her damage output, and her initial EX's 0.2 times damage buff as well as her ambition stack's 0.35 times buff are actually different, since they come from different sources, meaning they can stack with each other. So altogether, when using her EX with 5 ambition stacks against the dueled enemy, Neru's EX damage will be increased by a massive 195%. Hence, with all these combined, including Ryo's attack buff and Kisaki's EX skill damage, allows Neru to bring a world of hurt to a single yellow enemy, as she can pump out massive amounts of damage and shred through them with ease. Moving on, her basic skill boosts her piercing effectiveness by 58.8% at max level for a respectable 25 seconds every 35 seconds. So there's only a short 10-second downtime between activations after the initial one. Though this buff doesn't improve her damage as much as her EX's and subs buffs, but regardless, it is still a good buff. Finally, her enhanced skill increases her normal attack range by a fixed 100 and her attack by 21.2% at level 10 skill, while her enhanced skill plus at UE40 grants her an extra 577 attack boost. The attack range buff helps increase hers to around 550, allowing her to stay back a bit, somewhere slightly behind the tank, similar to DPS Arm Toshino. On the other hand, her attack buffs can help to boost her firepower, with UE40 being especially needed in harder endgame content like Torment to Lunatic raids. Though, like a basic, these attack buffs aren't as potent at increasing her damage compared to her sub and EX. But again, they are still really good, and don't let that deter you from getting her UE40 if you need to. Lastly, at UE50, her urban terrain mood upgrades from S to SS, and you can go for this level if you want her to perform better in harder urban content, as effectiveness against bosses in this terrain sees a good improvement. Overall, Uniform Neru is a really strong yellow DPS unit unit due to her EX's interesting gimmick of dealing more damage the more times you use it, with the buff capping at 5 times. Plus, she has a ton of self buffs in her kit that can help to further significantly boost her EX's damage. Now, where can Uniform Neru be used in? Well, again, you'd partner her with units like Seiya, Kisaki, Ryo, and etc. in order to further increase her EX's damage output and help spam her EX faster during her dueling state. Not to mention, her purple armor means she's quite flexible cause there aren't any significant content with purple attack enemies so far, while taking less damage from explosive attacks, making her one of the best yellow single target hyper carries in the game and the strongest yellow urban single target DPS by a long mile. Plus, she can also at times compete with Mika, the current strongest yellow single target damage dealer whom nearly every sensei resorts to for a comfy clear in yellow content, with her damage output being able to sometimes go even higher than our gorillas under the right circumstances. However, Mika mainly excels in indoor terrains, while Neru is for urban, so who you use usually depends on the boss you're facing and their terrains. Plus, for field terrains, which they are both good in, you can sometimes even use them in different teams. As such, Neru has become the premier go-to yellow DPS unit for quite a number of long yellow armored urban / field content that contain strong single target bosses, such as specific joint firing drills that fit the mentioned criteria, or those that require multi-hit units like the ones that have the 1 damage per hit mechanic. And for raids, while she wasn't used much at the start due to the release rates during that time not being good for her, she has now been brought into a number of yellow single target raids, one of which is Field Wakamo Hovercraft, being brought into quite a lot of Sensei's teams, especially for Insane to Lunatic, as she has proven useful for either phase. For phase 2, like a regular version, Uniform Neru is an excellent DPS choice in this phase, as a 46 EX can help to build up the Hovercraft's 10% increase incoming damage debuff faster, immediately taking it to 3 stacks with 1 use since there's a 15 hit requirement, while also helping to trigger weakness detection debuffs from units like PJ Noah and Meru, all of which benefit by the need to keep activating her EX, further allowing her to easily stack and trigger these debuffs. Plus, she can also simultaneously deal huge amounts of damage to the hovercraft. That being said, Uniform Neru has actually been used a lot more in phase 1 against Wakamo. This is because there are other units whom you can replace her with for phase 2, such as PJ Noah, who is probably the strongest damage dealer for this phase, regular Neru, Maki, and other fast attacking / multi-hit units. Meanwhile, there are currently only a few piercing single target DPS units who are truly effective in phase 1. Plus, Wakamo is a lone enemy, making it easier to plant the dual effect on her, whereas the hovercraft and radio tower are constantly switching back and forth in phase 2. Hence, her pick rate for this phase was much higher, especially on Insane to Lunatic, being used alongside units like Seiya, Hifumi, and Ryo in order to deal massive amounts of single target damage to Wakamo. Plus, for Lunatic, where way more teams are required, she, Mika, and even Swimsuit Hiyori were all used in separate teams. Though despite these, you can obviously use Uniform Neru in whichever phase you want, cause it also depends on the units you own. Aside from hovercraft, she was also used quite a lot in Yellow Urban Hieronymus, as seen during the last JP Hyro GA, particularly on Insane and Torment, where her role was pretty much really simple. Act as the team's hyper carry by constantly dealing huge damage to the punching bag through her EX with the help of Kisaki's and Ryo's buffs, either Mari or Kokona's heals to recover the urn so that he takes more damage, and Noah's defense down debuff to shred his exorbitant defense, all while resisting his raid attack. Finally, a bunch of other yellow urban or field raids that she could be used in are Bina. Even though she wasn't used at all in the JP Bina GA in March, she should still be a really good unit against this boss in both his terrains like Mika. There's also urban or field yellow Kaiten, where her 46 hit EX should easily destroy the robot's shield in phase 2. However, she isn't that good for field cheese, seeing little to no use in the last cheese GA cause the ball only opens up for a brief period in phase 2, so you need students with a burst EX like Mika instead to quickly defeat him when he's vulnerable, and someone like Uniform Neru who needs ramping up isn't ideal. So in conclusion, should you pull for Uniform Neru? In my humble opinion, yes, you definitely should, cause she will greatly help you in a bunch of yellow urban / field raids in probably a few months, becoming the main hyper carry for a number of them, seeing as she is one of the strongest piercing single target DPS units in the game, arguably on Mika's level. allowing you to have smoother clears in these content, especially for the harder difficulties. Not only that, she is a limited FES unit who will only return during the next anniversary, where you have a chance of spooking her, while her rerun banner will likely be sometime next year. Plus there's also double drop rate for 3-star units excluding the on-banner character, so it will be a great opportunity to try and get her and units that you don't have, including previous anniversary units, as well as extra Aligma to buy more of her Alevs in case you didn't get more copies. However, like I mentioned in my Rio review, I personally feel that gameplay wise, both Rio and Swimsuit Hanako should be your main priority over Uniform Neru, cause the former is way more flexible and universal, plus she is useful for most content as one of the game's newest meta buffers, while the latter is a really strong purple AoE DPS unit who is excellent in a lot of early game stuff, plus purple and blue content. Not to mention, for my beginner senseis, Uniform Neru isn't exactly a unit for early game stuff, and she is much more effective for endgame content like raids, with Rio and Swimsuit Hanako being more beginner friendly. Thus, in my opinion, your pull priority from a gameplay perspective should first be Rio or Swimsuit Hanako if you don't have her yet, though remember you can still spook her from the other two banners, then only Uniform Neru. Regardless, you should definitely try to own all three of them cause they are FES units, and if you're focused on pulling Uniform Neru cause you're a based lolly connoisseur with her being your waifu, and you wanna go on a date with her in her adorable beautiful L2D, then go ahead and pull for her. And that's all for this review. Again, the Rio review has already been uploaded, I'll leave the link in the pinned comment. Anyways, that's all from me, thanks for watching, good luck with your pulls, and I'll see y'all in the next one.